All right, you got your coffee? I got my coffee.
Cheers. So this article, basically, so Bangladesh is quite it's like a land of deltas, so there's lots of water. So they are one of the top countries that are affected by climate change in terms of flooding.
That makes sense.
So what they've done is that instead of raising chickens, they've now started to slowly move towards ducks because
they float.
ducks float and chickens do not. so because of climate change, there's actually going to be a lot more duck served in Bangladesh.
That is interesting. Why not just get long-legged chickens?
Could be long-legged chickens. Yeah, so that's that just kind of pinpoints the plight.
That's really interesting. Is by and large, climate change it's going to affect countries that don't necessarily have the resources to deal with it. And I really like hearing about simple solutions to complex problems.
Exactly.
Not that that's a full solution.
It's not a full solution,
It's like a patch.
it's kind of like a quirk, So you also had some news.
I do have some news. So I booked my ticket to the United States.
Okay.
I'm leaving next week Sunday.
All right. Very soon.
It is, yeah. I'm flying into Denver on the Monday, and then on the Tuesday I've got a vaccination appointment.
Okay.
At the Denver Ball Arena.
Okay.
And then Wednesday I've just booked out free just in case I get a little bit of a reaction to the vaccine. And then Thursday I'm taking the train through to Colorado to Carbondale to hang out with Tanner in the mountains for a bit.
That sounds awesome.
I am fully just going to go and vaccine tourist my way into the United States.
I mean, it's the way to go, right? I know one of my colleagues that I've just started working with this week was also in America getting her vaccine shots, and now she's back in Dublin.
Yeah, that's the plan. Is that I haven't been back to the I'm a United States citizen. My mom's from California, but I haven't been to the United States pre 9/11. Since then.
An interesting reference.
Right?
Were you there one day before? Or?
I haven't gone there since the incident.
I love having a good pinpoint of something that's quite striking to say your relative time.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
But so I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to be quite fun. Also, my rationalization over there is that in South Africa, the vaccine rollout is going fairly slow, based purely on the fact that we don't manufacture, or we have very limited manufacturing capabilities here for vaccines, and the stuff that we do produce locally is negligible. And our first shipment of AstraZeneca vaccines turned out to not be super effective against the South African variants, so we shipped those off to Namibia.
Yeah.
And now we've been getting Johnson & Johnson vaccines, which, interestingly enough, are called Janssen in the United States.
Janssen, probably.
Yeah.
So my dad and my gran both had their first jab.
Nice.
It was the Pfizer. So
Good.
I think that's part of there was the COVAX.
Mm-hmm.
So I think South Africa was part of that was getting the Pfizer vaccines as well as Johnson & Johnson.
Yeah, we were getting a whole bunch from India, but I'm not too sure if that's still the case now.
I think they're mostly being diverted to India.
Yeah, I think India really needs them right now.
I know. But interesting, we've just had kind of our first tech event.
Yeah.
Gathering.
It was definitely the first tech event that I've been to. I won't say it was particularly compelling, but it was.
I think it's compelling. I'm quite interested in where it's going.
I'm very interested in it, and I think I might have a bias towards. No, not a bias. I think today was just a bad day for me because I had a bug that I was sort of had my laptop open at the event, trying to fix that in as short a time as possible. So
the event is basically it's part of Silicon Cape. It's part of Simudisa. So they're trying to build or even ask the question of whether we need a startup act within South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
I actually I joined one of their calls on Zoom a couple of weeks ago, where I got most of what they're going to be presenting. today. Interesting enough, like I only found out about it via like a Twitter post.
Oh, interesting.
So it was a tweet, and I tried to sign up to the website, and as I told you, unfortunately the site's very poorly made, so I don't even think I was signed up because I typed it in, and I could see a little pop-up, and then I went, obviously as a developer, I popped into the into the developer tools, and I could see that there was like an error when I registered. So in terms of me wanting to find out more about it, it was kind of sad because I couldn't get that kind of those notifications, which is what today is about. Is that we're going to talk about.
Well, I guess that kind of hinges on what we were talking about last time. Is making or having South Africa as a developer-friendly place to like run your startup from, and they're definitely pushing towards that. And there are some disgruntled people, like the guy who was sitting behind us, who was like, 20 years ago, the legislative barriers that we have to running tech startups in South Africa have not changed, and haven't changed since then, and it's fairly frustrating.
Yeah, but I think it's also important that we are quite a young nation, and a lot of the people, demographically, we are pushing to be more into the 20s.
Yeah.
So it's more. Hopefully, there's going to be more people doing this kind of activism, getting involved, driving these kind of changes, rather than just relying on the government to do what's best for us. And even if it falls through and there's no legislative document that comes out of it, at least like as a community, you can see that there's strength within itself. So people who are going to be there, they might interact, and you can see that there is some sort of startup ecosystem.
Well, so this is a good tangent into today's topic of conversation.
Well, I was trying to tangent earlier.
I know, and I completely side-railed you. But so I'll pose the question to you, right? Is we know that there has been a big push towards privacy centricity because people's data is being harvested for advertising, right? By big tech companies like Facebook, Google, etc. Now, there have been a couple of governments, especially in the EU, that have stepped in to protect user data. And talking now about how government intervention can be both a good thing and a bad thing, or a good thing or a bad thing. Where do you stand with regards to specifically user data being used for advertising?
So first of all, I hate GDPR. That I hate.
It's not a good solution.
It's not a good solution. I can imagine the intentions are very pure, very good, but in my opinion, ever since GDPR rolled out, it's just made the internet a worse place to be in, because every single page I go onto has this huge big pop-up, and I basically just blast the accept all because I just want to get that pop-up out of my way so I can get to my content. So in terms of user experience, it's basically forced the whole industry to be like anti-UX.
Yeah.
And like I'm like actively looking for just a plugin to Firefox that automatically accepts, just to get that pop-up out of my face.
And as a person who's built a whole bunch of those pop-ups, you're not going to find a plugin that does that consistently because, like every pop-up is different.
It's just very, very annoying. It's just an annoyance, and I really don't think it's just closing that door there. It is quite loud. So it's annoying. I think the intentions are in the right place, but I don't think they've quite nailed what the intent is.
Yeah.
And in terms of the right to be forgotten, I agree with that. But in the same stroke, or on the other side of the page, as a small business, right? You want to get your word out to people. First of all, you need to advertise somehow. There's organic growth and all that, but you need to find people to actually interact with your product. So the way that you do that is by advertising. And then coming back to the consumer side, we should really get like a You should get like a podcast, like red light
On air.
On air, yeah. Where was I? So from the user point of view, to an extent, I don't mind if it's stuff that I think is cool, right?
Yeah.
So like the startup act day, like I don't mind being shown an ad for that because it's something I'm genuinely interested in attending.
So I think that the general consensus is not necessarily the problem with the fact that you get ads. It's the problem with targeted advertising, because it has a couple of adverse effects in that it creates these sort of myopic. I'm sure you've heard the term echo chamber tossed around a lot, and a lot of people are using that.
So what is a targeted ad though? Like what is your definition?
So let's say hypothetically, I search.
How many ads do you click on?
So I don't. Well, I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter.
How do you advertise Just Sketch Me?
Funny story on Facebook. So actually,
exactly. So it has a good side.
We don't take out paid advertising on those platforms. We just have them as a place for people to connect with us, because a lot of, especially like Gen Zs, don't really do email. Is instead what they'll do is they will pop us a message on Instagram, right? And that works out for us fairly well. I'd say that I was talking to Jason Grishkoff about Google and Facebook back in the early days. He was running a music blog, and he was getting a lot of organic traffic from Facebook. Upwards of 1 million people per month. And then, as soon as Facebook introduced the paid boost your posting, his organic traffic dried up extraordinarily fast, and he couldn't rely on Facebook as a consistent people stream without paying them. Which I understand, that's Facebook's business model. And I think I'm diverging from the conversation topic over here.
But it's an important thing. So I read a stat, and I can't remember the exact number, but in every venture capital round, like somewhere between 20 to 40% of the amount raised will go to advertising, which is either Google, Facebook, or Instagram, which is Facebook. So that's where your money goes when you're investing in a startup, because part of validating your idea is that you need to get it in front of people who want to use it, and so you can get feedback and then start to iterate on the product.
So I definitely agree that being able to target users is great for companies, right? No doubt about it. That's why Facebook, Google, Twitter are some of the most profitable companies in the world, or at least the most income-generating companies in the world. But I think there's this misunderstanding of what the platform is that when people think of Facebook, they think, oh, this is a social network, this is where I connect with my aunt and see her baby pictures, right? But in reality, it's an advertising platform. It is a place that offers a product to keep people engaged so it can serve them ads. And I think that that's where the danger comes in, is that the purpose of Facebook is not necessarily to connect people to one another. The purpose of Facebook is to keep people engaged, whether that be in a good or bad way. And through keeping them engaged, it means that more and more ads can be served to those people. And this, has disastrous effects in that something that is engaging isn't necessarily constructive, and that's why you see like rampant, ideological spouting on these platforms, because you are more likely to engage with something that you strongly agree with or strongly disagree with, whereas you're not necessarily going to engage with something that is okay. So that means that the extreme content is propagated more.
So that's more of a problem with social media rather than specific to advertising.
That is true. And it is a fundamental problem of social media. But when it comes to paid advertising, I guess you've got like Google, where you've got search engine results, and then you've got social media, and those are like the two major forms of paid advertising.
So is it maybe that the tools are being wielded by the wrong people?
Oh, absolutely. Or at least I get the feeling that
Because you've brought up before that you prefer trusted entities rather than untrusted or like trustless systems. So you prefer Apple having your data.
Yeah.
Because you know that the person behind it is using that data correctly.
Or so with Apple, it's because I can see the revenue stream, right? It's I pay Apple for this product, and then they give me that product, right? Whereas with Facebook and Google, it's I use that product, and they asymmetrically make their money via you processing my information, serving me specific ads, and using that in a specific way.
So so that's you're talking about the media, but the people who create those ads,
Yeah.
that's where the trust is, or that's where the trust needs to be. Because like if I'm scrolling through Instagram and there's something that I actually genuinely am interested in, like maybe there's a party coming up, maybe there's an event, that's cool. Like if they've targeted me correctly, then I'm not opposed to it. But if it's like a dumb ad that keeps showing up every time I open a YouTube channel, then it's kind of, and I guess that's also a point of it, is that it does get freaking annoying, just like the GDPR pop-ups, when you have like an ad that you really are not interested in, and you like immediately want to skip. But then there's some things that you are interested in, maybe not in the video sense, maybe in more of like the static.
I understand where you're going with that, and I think it's less on an individual level that I have a problem with it. It's more in the holistic, grander scheme of things. Is that yes, I don't like ads on my YouTube videos, right? But maybe personalized ads on the YouTube videos aren't as bad as non-personalized ads on YouTube videos, right? You're right over that. I'd say that the problem comes in with people in aggregate. Like, there was a video I was watching recently about how this one guy went and acted like he created an account on Facebook, and he went and he acted a bit right-leaning, and because Facebook picked up that stuff from his posts and the content that he interacted with, it started advertising to him military surplus, firearm upgrades, etc., etc., etc. So it just like sent him down that path, right? Whereas I remember I haven't spent a lot of time on YouTube, right, recently, but back in the day I would watch, let's take for instance something that was slightly left-leaning, like Stephen Colbert. I'll watch one of his, and then it will recommend to me like John Oliver. I'm like, oh, okay, and then I go down that hole, and then all of my recommendations after a while are like Jon Stewart, Daily Show, and then it starts going even, like very left into channels talking about gender rights, etc., etc., etc. And so I've experienced that from the other side, and like the fact of the matter is, yes, I'm left leaning, but I could see myself following that rabbit hole and becoming quite extreme in my ideas.
Yeah, so I would say that's more the rabbit hole of social media and trying to hook people in, which isn't itself a bad trait.
But
right?
the point of that is that is because of paid advertising. Is that these channels have to keep you engaged so that you remain on platforms, so that you're served more ads. The same can be said with Tinder. Tinder has absolutely no interest in you dating or hooking up with someone. They want you to carry on swiping, because the more you swipe, the more they can serve you ads. The more they can serve you their own ads for stuff like your power-ups or whatever the devil you get on Tinder nowadays. And the actual incentive to meet up with someone is completely diminished. Is you're incentivized to just carry on swiping in perpetuity, because that's how they make their money.
Do you think that an ethical company could exist in the social media or advertising space? Maybe not and or. Maybe we can talk about them individually.
Theoretically.
Because I know, like, specifically from what I'm hearing a lot in the startup scene in Silicon Valley is like Facebook's and Mark Zuckerberg specifically is quite a hated character just because of his practices.
I mean, he's also just like firmly a lizard person. I have seen his tongue like flick out and lick his eyeball.
He doesn't blink his eyes a whole lot, and it reminds me of that like Theranos lady, Elizabeth Holmes. So that does. But the thing is, like, if they wanted to, if there was a paid Facebook where you pay subscription, then the money would be coming from your subscription.
Yeah. But it would be exclusionary.
But then are you letting go of network effects? Because I feel like there's a network effect of like we can get more money just by people spreading the word about something.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very tough thing to.
Because you're moving from exponential to like, okay, we've got this many users, this many active users, this many who are gonna pay, and then you've got a fixed amount, and you've got to focus on getting more paid customers.
Yeah. And it's tough. Is that like I think that we have been. The internet set a precedent of being free, right? Yeah. And that is a beautiful thing, but it's also a pretty destructive thing now. Is that we kind of expect everything on the internet to be free, and so companies need to find other ways to monetize. And it's one of the reasons why I like Apple. Apple doesn't dilly-dally with that. They're like, you pay us money, and we'll provide you a service, and I like that transaction. But I also realize that I am extraordinarily privileged to like that transaction.
Yeah.
Right? Is that Facebook is free, Google is free, and
but Apple also like they elevate via marketing and advertising. They elevate their product to be something really great, so that you do pay a premium.
As I said, I'm extraordinarily privileged
that is the thing. So there's this thing in economics where, like, there's certain types of goods, like for instance Ferraris, Lamborghinis, like where price, like you can increase the price and people will still pay.
Yeah.
I can't remember. It's called something like some sort of privileged good, or so they're trying to get to that point where like you can, as long as like you offer a new iPhone every year, that like top 1% are gonna always purchase it.
Yeah.
Because they want to one up their friends.
That's
a different.
That's a whole different one.
But they do have a certain level of advertising, and they give off a persona, which I think they're only catching up to now. The whole privacy-centered thing. I think they maybe thought, hey, this is actually quite a good idea that we should, focus on privacy.
I mean, they happen to just have that
Facebook,
anyway, right? But now they're really pushing that because everyone's a bit worried about that. I mean, I literally run a privacy-centric blogging platform.
Yeah, but they also, I mean, they still have like all the gates for the App Store. I don't know how that court case is playing out.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So it's definitely like it's us or no one.
I do have a. Going back to your question, can let's take for instance a social media company run ethically? And I think that it could, but it would mean that it would have to run as a foundation-funded entity, right? So let's take for instance, instead of Facebook, you have Facebook run by the Facebook Foundation, and the foundation is funded potentially by countries, because like countries know the impact that these social media platforms have. I mean, for better or for worse, mostly worse. Genocide in Myanmar, ethnic cleansing in Ethiopia, both pretty much due to Facebook. So there is incentive by companies to try and rectify these problems. And it would be interesting to have a social media platform that is actually good and usable, that is disaligned from creating a bad social experience. But the thing is that by creating something like that, it would be a less engaging product. So a more engaging product would outcompete it. So it's like a really tough problem to solve.
It's tough because these companies have already cemented themselves quite solidly. I don't know if you looked at the whole WhatsApp scandal. So like there was a whole thing about like, whoa, WhatsApp's got this privacy thing, and in reality they just wanted to add in a few business features to help businesses who want to interact via WhatsApp. But there was like a big shift, and now we talk on Telegram. But like, there's still people who are like very adamantly sticking to WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Even with the all of the privacy stuff, which I mean, I don't know if I think the chat is still encrypted, but it's the metadata around the chat.
I haven't accepted those terms updates yet, and I'm going to see what happens if I never accept them. But I will definitely say this: Telegram has more features than WhatsApp, but WhatsApp is the nicer app. It just works TMCR.
But that's the gravity of the network, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got everyone on WhatsApp. So to try and draw that from, say, like Twitter or Facebook, that's like a big enough problem as it is. And maybe you won't be able to monetize as quickly by having like a very privacy-centric social media platform.
So I know that you're a big fan of decentralization, right?
Yes.
And there are a few things that I do really like that are by their nature decentralized. So a perfect example is email, right? Email is a decentralized way for people to communicate with each other using, the mail protocols. And then you can theoretically run your own mail server. I don't really recommend it because it's a lot of finagling, but you can. And there are a lot of different services that offer mail servers. Your Gmails, your Proton Mails, your iCloud mails, whatever. And I would love to see messaging work like that again. I know we had like IRC back in the day, back in the good old days. But I would love to see like an end-to-end encrypted messaging protocol emerge, and us moving away from using specifically WhatsApp or Telegram or Signal to using clients that use that same messaging protocol. So I can use the cool chat client and message you on the cat chat. You're using cat chat, and we can still make that connection across different platforms.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there is definitely what was I going to say? Okay, so the thing about email is that you still rely on an address, right?
Yeah.
So you need to be addressable.
Yeah.
And I think to a certain degree, like Signal is a protocol.
Yeah.
The Signal protocol
WhatsApp runs on the Signal protocol.
WhatsApp does use the Signal protocol. But I don't think that's a chat protocol. It's more of an encryption protocol, of where you ratchet the encryption to the next message.
Yeah. So there are
and I think I've read that Facebook is looking to intermingle all of their different chat platforms, just because they're under pressure by regulatory bodies to break apart.
Yeah.
So by intermingling Instagram with WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, they're going to make it almost impossible to break them apart. Which means that they will have to, keep their chat platforms.
So,
but I do agree. I think that we should be able to message between each other in a way that is not held by a single.
So we can technically. It's SMS. Right. The problem is SMS is just really expensive, and SMS has the same problem that email has, although it's been mostly solved with email is spam. Right? Is that 90% of the SMSs I get are just absolute wank, and we don't have spam filters like we do on email for our SMS clients. But I reckon if we started using something that sits on top of IRC or whatever, is we'd have to start creating chat spam bots or chat spam checkers.
The thing is that like it's still so outside of the realm for most people. Like with email, you have to run an email server, right?
Yeah.
So you have to have your own server. So if you imagine, like, let's take it to the nth degree. So every person in the world has to run their own email server.
I know, and that's a tough thing to ask. Yeah.
And it sounds like every person having their own private keys. So being identifiable by that address, which is your public key, that is potentially going to be leading you to a system where you can address different people. So I could go into my blockchain-enabled app, and I can see all the messages that have been sent to my public key.
So I'd say that what I like about email isn't necessarily that everyone can run their own servers. It's just that there are a variety of different services that you could use that can interact with one another, right? So, like, you could theoretically spin up your own mail server, but I've never done that myself, and I don't intend to. But I can if I dislike what Google is doing with my Gmail account. I can, move over to Proton Mail, and I can still message you who uses Gmail from my Proton Mail account. And I think that's the important part for me, is that you're not locked into a specific vendor, and you can still interact with the rest of that network.
But there's still the profit motive of that person hosting the email server.
It's true, and then I would find an email provider that I like the transaction mechanism. Like I pay them money, and they give me an email address, or they give me a.
But they still have the ability to lock you out.
Oh, absolutely.
So if you don't pay, and they don't have an export email system, then you're locked into their kind of way of working. We've already picked. I think we should have a new spot.
I mean, I really like the feel of the spot. It's just too much traffic.
It's just so much, and it's all the time. Anyway.
Um,
But so I was listening to the CoinDesk podcast, and one of the things with like decentralization and with blockchain is this idea that you can group together people using some of these consensus mechanisms, and you can have get to a point where you, with your tokens or your cryptocurrency, or not cryptocurrency, blockchain enabled application, you can group people together into these kind of bigger entities than what they are. So say I want to have a startup act, then we can I can give my voting rights almost, or my sovereignty to the person. Not sovereignty, that's probably a bad word. And you can have a whole bunch of people collectively vote using their tokens. And that person who gets all of those could then use that to counteract another entity. So if you think of like the startup act, say we want to get a startup act together, we can get people involved and get to a point where we have all of these people who are agreeing with whatever this one person says, and then they can then say, well, I want to do this on behalf of all these people, and here's the proof that these people are backing.
So it's kind of like a digitally signing a digitally signing a petition.
It's the digital petition, but it actually has
A way of.
it's more of a measured way rather than just an online thing that you click.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So in terms of like coming up with new legislation or showing your support base in kind of like a social way, it can become a lot easier.
Okay, that's interesting.
And there's a lot of things that come out of that, and I'll share the link maybe in the notes, or I'll share it with you.
Yeah, do it.
But it's really like the things that we like that the blockchain space is like opening up is going to be of that order. Obviously, you need to have social consensus or social acceptance, which is a problem in itself.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, people have to say, does this specific form of digital petition, are we going to allow this to change real world structures?
So, I mean, like that's where it comes to like governance, right? So say, like, I think I've read rumors or read articles that Twitter maybe want to create their own mechanism so that you can create your own algorithm for ranking tweets.
Oh, interesting.
So theoretically, you could have your own algorithm and say, well, I want to rank tweets based on this, this, and this. So you could theoretically have people almost vote on a specific algorithm for Twitter to use, and if it's all decentralized and it's all on this like autonomous machine, once this reaches a maximum or a threshold, then it switches to a new way.
Oh, that's pretty interesting.
So you can have people changing like the algorithm of the company, and that's what like really unlocks with like decentralization and you know, the blockchain part.
Well, let's loop this back. What do you think of Mastodon?
I don't know what that is.
You don't know what Mastodon is?
What is that?
Mastodon is a decentralized social media platform.
That's probably why. Because I'm too happy with Instagram now. Like
you're on the
Mastodon. That's the thing. That's what we're talking about. Is that, you know, it's very hard for these people doing it right to attract.
Yeah, because, you know, they don't have.
And if I've got all my ads switched off, I'll never know about it anyway. So
I don't know if they advertise on Mastodon. On Instagram, but they I did see a really interesting Signal advert on Instagram or Facebook where it actually used the data that was provided by the platform, and it said like, "Hey there, you doctor living in Idaho who has just gotten engaged. You should probably use Signal because Facebook's harvesting your information." And obviously Facebook pulled those ads because it showed people transparently how much information Facebook has on them. Because in the end, they're also making inferences, right? Facebook doesn't just have the information that you provide, but they make inferences about you. Like, they can tell that you got engaged, they can tell that you are doing things based on the interactions that you have on that platform.
So I read something very interesting, or I maybe heard of it. So the difference between things like Facebook and Google, right, is that Facebook, they are trying to interpret your intent. They're trying to figure out what your intent is at all times. Whereas Google, you just type in your intent. You're like, I want to find events on this week. I want to look for a hotel.
Yeah, Google's got that good data.
So they don't have to do, Google doesn't have to do as much snooping.
Yeah.
Because you're basically giving them what you want. You're asking Google what you want. And that's the intent. So they don't have to do all of this like creepy stuff that Facebook does. Because Facebook they don't know your intent. You're like scrolling through looking at your friends and family and who knows what. So they got to try and figure out like, okay, who is this person? What are they looking for? And then give that up to advertisers.
Yeah, no, that's true.
So that is why Facebook is more snoopy, and that's why they try and do this like cross-site tracking, whereas Google they can basically figure out from what you're typing.
They can figure out from what you're typing, but also a secondary thing with Google is that Google also provides Google Analytics, which most websites are running because it's free, right? Which means that you can browse the internet, and most of the sites that you go onto, Google has a record of where you are on the internet, which is fairly interesting because they can piece together what your browsing habits are just based on the sites that use Google Analytics.
But if you have marketers that are using that tool effectively, then they should be targeting the correct people. Assuming it's a good product. Like, say I want to invite people to, I'm using events a lot because it is something that like I find quite tricky to find, is like events happening in the area. Like I don't use Facebook anymore. And I think that was one of the good features. And now you've got platforms like Cricut and Howler that are kind of doing that. But say I wanted to market my event, and I want it's an event like maybe an art event where you can create clay pots, or you can do some fun event of maybe starting an art studio. How do if I go onto Google and like I create some ads? Do I do it? Okay. So if I want to get people to this event, right? And I create like a tasteful ad, and I want to target specific people, and I do it effectively. It's only going to go to those people who are interested in art and maybe potentially going to, come to the event. Whereas if I'm doing a blanket ad campaign, then it's more likely to hit someone who's not interested, and then it's going to cause a problem.
No, that's true, and I think for the end user again, targeted ads are a better user experience. That's true. I think it just creates broader social problems. So I also don't think that Facebook has my best intentions at heart.
Yeah. So I mean that is a problem.
Yeah.
So I think that they don't have the correct intentions, but the people using the tools, maybe they are not trained as well. And I mean, I know people who are using Google ads and Facebook ads and probably just starting, they have not much of a clue how to use it.
Yeah.
I talk to my brother a lot. He also uses a lot of Google ads, and he knows how to kind of find the demographics and find who's using it. And there is a certain element of marketing to that where you're trying to find out, like, where are my customers? How do I find these customers? So I don't think it's the people who are doing it behind the scenes that are necessarily bad.
No.
It's that Facebook obviously wants to attract those people.
Yeah.
So they need to have better demographics. It's not necessarily the problem for me, assuming that I'm open to it.
Assuming that you're open to it.
If I'm not open to it, then
yeah,
that's maybe where it falls apart, right?
Okay, so going back to like GDPR stuff, those pop-ups very rarely have a decline. Like, don't.
Well, that is part of the problem, right? You either accept or you don't use the service. You get the hell out of Dodge.
Yeah. But I have come to appreciate sites that are like, hey, you can say no. I'm like, cool, I say no.
Yeah. And I mean that would require like a central protocol place where you have decided like, hey, I'm going to opt out of everything.
So
and
that's,
then you can just check against this database, and you can just tell whether I've opted in or out.
That's an interesting one, like having a GDPR pop-up as a service, right? Where you have a script, an embeddable script that websites can use that remember your preferences. So you can say accept this time, but then you can also say accept for all sites, and then all the sites that use this embeddables.
But I don't think GDPR allows for that. I think it has to be per company, and that's probably why it fails. To be honest, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. But I think that's where, maybe they haven't constructed the legislation correctly, legislation. And I think I've watched a few videos about people that are trying to improve that, because that, as it is quite annoying.
Right.
And I mean, there's different things for different types of pages. Like if you can't hold a session across, like how do you even log in, right?
Yeah.
Like if you can't add a cookie to the website, like.
So I had an interesting conversation last night. I tried out the dating app Bumble recently, and I was talking to this person
Does
about.
it even work?
Sorry?
Does it even work?
Oh yeah, it's think of it like Tinder, but they actually have mechanisms built in there to incentivize people to talk to one another. So you've got like 24 hours to contact the other person, woman make the first move, etc., etc. But my blogging platform came up, and we were talking about privacy centricity, and it came up I'm not on social media, and I had my justifications ready for it, and they're like, okay, but you gave all your data or all your information to this dating app, and it kind of stumped me for a bit. And I'm like, shit, I did give my information to that dating app. But then I realized that that's not actually the data that I'm worried about. right? The data, I'm not necessarily worried about like my profile data, right? What I'm worried about is my usage data, but not specifically mine. It's people's usage data in aggregate, because it's not about me knowing what your name is, right? Me, big evil company. It's not about me knowing what your name is. It's about knowing that people as a whole tend to think like this, and so I can use that information to, change the way that people behave slightly, but again, in aggregate.
It is that that almost the mind controlliness of it, where they're like, you get these, and it's maybe like being disenfranchised by like big enterprises, right? Where like, oh, these big enterprises, there's probably some guy in a suit who's like, right, we need to make X amount of money by the end of the month, or by the end of the year, Q2, Q3. So how do we do this? Oh, let's just take this data and do this like ungodly thing, and let's just get money because that's what we've been told, and that's what our investors want. In honesty, like apart from like privacy, I do think is very important, right? What you do in your own home, like that is super critical, and like privacy is very important for the way that society develops. So we need to have privacy, but it's not really a worry of mine if my data goes missing, because I mean these days like you have to put your flipping email in for everything, right? That's not what I'm worried about. And even if like bank details or like my ID goes missing, it shouldn't be on me whether someone opens a bank account with my ID number, right?
Yeah,
it should be on the bank.
You
bank should do due diligence, and that is also part of the problem, is that it's the onus is being pushed onto the user rather than these companies who have the money for it. They have the facility to say, okay, let's do due diligence. Let's just check if this person is who they say they are, and let's not open this bank account because we don't trust them or we don't know who it is. So there's a certain element where I don't really care, because I mean, if my identity gets stolen, it's not my problem, or it shouldn't be my problem. It should be whoever takes out the loan's problem.
The responsibility should be on that entity, yeah.
That's not how most companies think, and I think I haven't had it to me. I've never had my identity stolen, and I've never been scammed, and I think that's where it can get problematic, is that you get scammed because someone knows your identity, and they say, hey, John Smith, or hey, Jason, I know that I'm working from X person that you've interacted with.
Yeah.
So maybe when it comes to the malicious side,
I got pretty close to being scammed, getting a phone call from my bank, who not only had my, name and my phone number and physical address, but also had the answers to my security questions.
oh wow,
With, the general ones, like the ones that I get are like, I guess I shouldn't say it out loud.
Yeah, don't say it out loud. But that's the thing. Like I think that is actually maybe because I've managed to develop a certain skepticism, with phone calls.
Yeah.
And so if someone says they're from the bank, I'm like, no, I'll phone the bank.
I'll phone you.
So I know that I'm getting the right person. And maybe that's why like phone calls are eventually on the downward slope, because you just can't prove who is actually talking on the phone.
Right. And that's why you should get a private banker and do all of your work through the private banker.
There's that privilege again.
There's that privilege again.
So, what are you looking forward to your trip then?
I am looking forward to my trip. I think it's going to be incredibly fun. I've, as I said earlier, I haven't been to the United States in a really long time. 20 years.
Really?
Jeez, 20 years.
I was there at the beginning of 2020, before the lockdown.
Yeah. You were in Seattle.
Seattle, yeah. It was pretty cool. I thought you must let me know if they let foreigners get vaccines, because I might also go there.
I'll ask them when I'm at the.
But I think I'm
vaccine
hoping. I know Europe's opened up a little bit.
Yeah.
So they're now allowing. Obviously, I'm staying in the UK, which is not part of Europe anymore.
So apparently there's a lot of like post-vaccine parties going on all over the United States.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes me think of that South Park episode where all the old people get vaccinated and they're just like driving around, just drinking, like
Yeah, exactly.
hey, unvaccinated.
Yeah, exactly. But I know like the Netherlands are now open, like they don't have restrictions for South Africa,
Oh, interesting.
but not for. I mean, you have to have a valid reason, business,
Right.
or you're a student. But like the whole EU is still not allowed for travel, like for travelers.
What about you? What does your next week look like?
I'm not too sure. I'll probably go for a braai on the weekend.
Nice.
Heard
Nice.
Saturday is going to be quite nice.
I'm gonna be in Gordon's Bay.
Okay.
Yeah, gonna ride out that side, and then come back on Sunday. And I think overall the weather's beautiful.
Yeah.
Cape Town's great. Cape Town's great.
Yeah. So I might go join that startup act group
Do it.
later after a few calls.
Are they hanging out there like the entire day?
I think until like two until 4 maybe.
Okay, cool.
So, but I don't know if I'll be there the whole time. As for the discussion part, I think I'm quite interested to hear what the problems are.
I hear you. Well, I will catch up with you about that. I'm gonna go and swing around heavy bits of metal until my arms hurt.
Yeah. You enjoy that. All right, cool. Let's go get something to eat.
All right, good chat.